Hey, Beacon, hey, I'm so excited you are here and ready to build the blueprint with me today. And of course, before we do, I want to bless you with another review. This week's review is from a listening fan, and here's what she has to say. A must listen. This podcast is so good. She drops some gold nuggets in here. If you're trying to get your life and your money at the same time, this podcast will help you get there. Thank you so much, listening fan, for listening and for your review. And if you have not already, I want to challenge and encourage you to leave a review so that other beacons just like you can find the Bounce Back Blueprint community, get connected, and join us on the journey to building the blueprint. This week's episode is going to bless you. And it's actually one of the very first episodes I recorded when I first started podcasting back in 2017. More on that later. But the topic of this episode is how to tackle your God sized dream. And I felt like it was the perfect follow up as we continue this series about imposter syndrome. So, it is going to have some references that are a little dated because of the time frame, but focus on the meat of the episode, and I promise you will be blessed. And I would love, of course, to hear your feedback after you tune in. So, without further ado, how to tackle your God-sized dream. If you haven't already, go ahead, grab your tea, grab your coffee, maybe your journal, and we are going to dig in. This is episode 2, how to tackle a God-sized dream. And I'm going to go ahead and give you a spoiler alert. You don't. You don't tackle a God-sized dream. You actually take hold of it. So I want to give you the backdrop of how God prepared me to take hold of my God-sized dream, and then share with you some keys about how to maneuver and move through this process as God begins to manifest his God-sized dream in and through you. So about 10 years, maybe 11 years ago, I was in a space where I was in pursuit of and I was pretending to be what I thought I wanted and what I thought I was going to be. And literally overnight, my world came crashing down and I was exposed. And I came crashing down so hard. I fell so hard that I ended up homeless, heartbroken, feeling hopeless, and actually hurt physically. And in that season, it was a challenge for me to even begin to process how all of the pain I was in the midst of could possibly be part of a bigger plan or a purpose for my life. In fact, the possibility that I would even be able to begin again to manifest the purpose, or that I even wanted to begin again to manifest the purpose that I felt God had for me, was questionable. And I was broken down. And so I felt in this season like I had become everything that I had worked so hard not to become. I was suddenly feeling as if everything I did was for naught. I was a single mom. I was broke. I was homeless. If I'm honest and completely transparent, I was overweight. So I was a walking statistic in every, and if you looked at my life holistically, I was the statistic of everything that I never wanted to become. And it broke me down. What I felt was my reality was beating me down more and more every single day. And in this season, I found myself in a space where I was with other women, also with their children, and they were also carrying around a lot of the labels based on the statistics that people in the world were using to label us. And we were all pretty downtrodden. And we were in this space. And even though I was hopeless, I recognize now that even then God was using me to help the other women and children who I was surrounded with find hope. Not only that, he was allowing me to see my own reflection to give myself hope. I was able to be the light for others. And also I could see the reflection of my own light, so that not only was I giving them hope, I was really literally giving hope to myself. And so in this season, I remember at the time I spoke very haphazardly. I just flung these words into the atmosphere, and I shared with the other women. I said, you know what? When this is all over, I'm going to write a book about this. I said, what we are living through, what we've experienced, and potentially what we are going to experience in the next few weeks and months, no one would believe it unless they experienced it. And so I'm going to write a book about this. And again, at the time, it was just something that I said. It was, again, something God used in that season to give hope in the environment that I was in. Because once I made this declaration, everybody around me took hold of it. They looked forward to it. And, things would happen and they would say, Tiff, you write that down, Tiff, or you going to put this in the book? And so it gave them something to hold on to. It gave us all a little bit of something to look forward to for the future, even though there were so many things in our lives that just seemed impossible for us to tackle. And I didn't know then, but I know now that what I spoke into the atmosphere then was in fact a prophetic word. And so I want to share with you today a little bit about this process, this journey that I've taken since or in these 11 or so years to begin to take hold and manifest my God-sized dream. And so the first thing that I had to recognize, the first thing that I had to do, and that I want to encourage you to do today, is to let God live. You have to let God live. You have to let God live through you. You have to stop hating on God. Yes, I'm saying it. Stop hating on God. Because if I'm honest and completely transparent, I was hating on God back then. I was like, why is this my life? You know what I mean? But here's the thing. We have to stop using our procrastination to justify the lie that God hasn't kept his promises to us. God is not going to play you, but you're playing yourself if you think you can go higher without his highness. And that is part of what he had to show me in that season. But here's what you need to know. There is no platform, there is no prophet, and there is also nothing you can pretend to be that will take you higher than your purpose. If you're planning to live the dream, you have to be willing to adopt God's version of the dream. You have to let him live. And ultimately, that's what happens in this space. When you're trying to take hold of God's dream for you, you have to release the dream that you have for yourself. You have to let it go. One of my life scriptures, a scripture that I've known since I was a little girl, I don't even remember when I memorized it, but it's a pretty popular scripture, right? We throw it around like it's a Drake lyric, and it sounds good and it looks good as an Instagram caption, and it is Jeremiah 1:5. Jeremiah 1:5 says, "Before I formed you in the womb, I knew you. Before you were born, I set you apart. I appointed you as a prophet of the nations." So here's the thing. Jeremiah 1:5 is powerful. And like I said, it sounds good when we throw it around. But the truth is, if we're not going to walk in the truth of what Jeremiah 1:5 says for our lives, then there is no power in it. When you accept it as your truth, though, when you recognize and begin to internalize and live the truth that you were set apart in the womb, that is when you begin the process to manifesting the masterpiece that God created you to be. And so literally, nearly 10 years to the day that I found myself living in that nightmare, I sat down and I started penning the book that I thought was this haphazard profession way back then. And I penned this book in 30 days, 30 days. And here is why. Because I let God live through me. I accepted his truth for me. I traded my dream for his. And when you do that, when you take hold of God's dream, when you release what you thought what's for you and take hold of what he has for you, things will begin to change at God's speed. No one would have ever told me I could write a book in 30 days, but I did. And even though the beginning of the book wasn't what I would have wanted it to be. You know what I mean? Because I've been wanting to write a book since I was a little girl. I've been a bookworm for as long as I can remember. I started writing books when I was in 3rd grade. And so I always wanted to write a book. But for as many books that I have started and not finished, for as many ideas that I've had about writing a book, this setback that I had 11 years ago was never the foundation that I would have laid for my book to be birthed, but God. And so because I recognized that God's dream was my dream, what I learned and what I accepted as well was that I am not a chameleon. And what that means is my path is not supposed to line up with everyone else's path. Your path is not supposed to line up with everyone else's path. He set us apart in the womb. We are supposed to stand out. We are supposed to be outcasts. People are supposed to be questioning why we do things the way we do them. And especially when there appears to be an easier way or there's a way that everyone else is doing it. Listen, this is the season of the outcast. So when God gives you a God-sized dream and you say yes, when you take hold of it, when you start to let God live through you, know that they will question you. I was absolutely getting questioned about the way I was spending my time in August, specifically because I had just been offered a job. And people were like, why aren't you taking that job? Why aren't you going to get that money? And here's the thing. This is the distinction between hustling higher and hustling harder, because so many times hustling higher looks stupid. It looks like you're doing nothing. It doesn't make any sense. And so all I can do and all I can encourage you to do when they ask you why or how or what is tell them in your Mary Mary voice, it's the God in me. Listen, God set me apart. He set me apart. He appointed me when I was in the womb before I even came into this world. That's why. So know that when you say yes and when you accept the dream, you are being prepared and you are going to be propelled into step 2. This is, like I mentioned in episode 1, when you are operating in your sweet spot. And so step 2 is recognize your position. So in this world of social media, right, we do a lot of haphazard professing. So we post these memes and these statuses. We even like, love, and share them. And they say things like, I'm doing me, I'm staying in my lane. But the question is, are you really? Here is how you know when you have recognized your position. When you recognize your position, you stop auditioning for the roles that God has assigned to you. You will miss out on your lead when you are so busy trying to be in other people's spotlight. You have to be willing to accept the truth that you perform for an audience of one. God will begin to stretch you and press you to do things that you don't even think is possible. And the truth is, we are always willing to make these professions, to say these things, to post these quotes that say things like, only God can turn a mess into a message. God's going to use my test for my testimony. But here's the thing. If you aren't in position, that will not be the case. You have to be willing to let him reinvent you. You have to let God reinvent your mess and reinvent the test. You have to give him yourself as the mess in order for him to reinvent you. That means you have to be seeking him first, so you'll know when your role is to be the vessel and when your role is to be the visionary. And sometimes when when you are the vessel, he is the highest visionary, he himself. And when as the vessel, he wants you to be the visionary for others, he will let you know. In other words, you sometimes have to go through as the vessel in order to blaze the path for others to grow through as the visionary and as the voice he is calling you to be. In my case, as I spent those days writing page after page of this book, I had to accept that I was only the vessel. At that time, I had no business trying to envision what would come next, how I would pay to publish this book, how I would promote it, who would read it. None of that was necessary in that season. I was simply honoring God by doing what I knew He had for me to do in that season. And I had to rejoice in the revelation that I was in purpose. Nobody else could see. Nobody else knew, but God knew. Nobody else knew I was in purpose. No one else knew I was in position, but God knew. And that's why it's so important to know that you perform for an audience of one, because He has been rewarding me for rejoicing in my positions ever since I wrote the very first word on the first page of that book. This is what you need to know. You can't chase the blessings. You can't chase the applause. You can simply chase God. And that is what is meant by Matthew 6:33. Matthew 6:33 is another one of those scriptures that we quote parts of, right, when it sounds good. And it simply says this: but seek first His kingdom and His righteousness, and all these things will be given to you as well. It's that simple. Seek Him first, and all other things will be added to you. Seek Him. Let Him tell you what position you need to play, and all other things will be added to you. You can't expect to hit it out of the park if you think you're supposed to be an outfield catcher. You won't know if you're positioned in the right place unless you are seeking Him first. It is the most important step to take as you begin to hustle higher, to seek Him. You have to seek Him if you want to go higher. And as you seek Him and begin to see Him, you can move on to step 3, and you can really begin to make moves. So, step 3, I know, another one, very cliche, but let me give you my perception on this. And so step 3 is write the vision and make it plain. And this comes from Habakkuk 2, another scripture that we throw around like our winter coat when we get in the house on a cold day. But guess what? Verse 3 is equally, if not more, important. And so let me read Habakkuk 2 verses 2 and 3 to you. So we're very familiar with verse 2. It says, write down the revelation and make it plain on tablets, so that a herald may run with it. 3, for the revelation awaits an appointed time. It speaks of the end and will not prove false. Though it linger, wait for it. It will certainly come and will not delay. And so, we have to recognize that verse 3 is equally important. And here's what I mean by this. God gave me the vision for that book 10 years ago. I spoke it into existence prophetically during the worst season of my life, but it wasn't plain to me then. The vision was already written. I wholeheartedly believe, though, that God wants us to make plain our willingness and our desire to hustle higher. He wants to know that we are ready to manifest His masterpiece. And that is why verse 3 says it awaits an appointed time. It does not prove false. Sometimes God gives us glimpses of grace. He may not give you the whole vision. He will give you a glimpse, and He wants you to make plain that you receive it and that you'll move on it. I carried around a yellow legal pad when I was in that space, and I let the people pick alias names, and I began jotting down stories and notes and things that were being said. And even then, at that time, I never thought those notes I was scribbling on that legal pad will become a published work. Again, it was then just something I thought I was doing. So write the vision with the actions you take from the beginning. He will continue to make it plain as you do. I finished writing the book, and then He told me I was going on a tour. It was never part of my dream, the dream that I had to release and accept His to go on a tour. My dream was simply to become a published author. But God took it a step further. He told me I was going on a tour, 30 days, 30 stays, because the book that I'm writing is called 30 Day Stay. So he told me, you know what, now that you've done that, let me give you the next glimpse of grace. You're going on a book tour, 30 days, 30 stays, somewhere different every single day. Because women everywhere need to know the power of God and how pain can be purposed to reinvent you for his plan, for his dream. So that's what you want to remember when it comes to writing the vision and making it plain. You have to be willing to make it plain to God that you receive the vision and that your actions will make it plain that you are ready for the revelation at the appointed time. You know, it doesn't mean that you have to know it all and literally write it down, because you can write it down and do nothing with it. The vision is made plain by your willingness to take steps, your willingness to activate your faith and make your faith not something you're holding in your hand. Make the vision not something that you put on a piece of paper and just hold, but make it an action. When you begin to do the vision, that is when it will become plain. And that's what happened with me. When I started, writing the vision way back then, but it wasn't made plain because I did nothing with it. It took me it took me a whole 10 years to come full circle, but that was the appointed time. The revelation awaits an appointed time. So be encouraged. If he's only giving you glimpses and grace, accept them wholeheartedly with open arms. Don't minimize the small beginnings. These 3 steps are the beginnings of tackling, they were the beginnings of me tackling my God-sized dream, of taking hold of them. And so over the next few months, my plan is to begin to share with you all of the tea on this road to the publication of this book and to the Reinventing You book tour. So stay tuned, hold tight, and make sure you're jotting all of this down and move in it, act in it. Allow this to be part of the appointed time for your vision to be made plain. Let God live, recognize your position, and write the vision and make it plain with your life. And before I go, I just want to give you 3 other truths, my 3 truths and takeaways, and they are this. Don't despise small beginnings. Start where you are. My willingness to start writing 1 book manifested into me being able to publish not 1, but 2 books this year, because God. Number 2, sometimes you've got to unbecome to become. Even if you think you're good in a certain position, even if everybody told you you should, you must, it doesn't matter. God things over good things. I got offered 3 jobs in August while I was writing that book. And while I needed the money like nobody's business, God told me he was going to take care of me and I needed to write that book. So I chose to hustle higher. And the third thing is your unbelief is what's stopping you from, or your unbelief is preventing you from being unstoppable. A seed becomes an apple tree because God. Why don't you believe the small seed he has planted in you can produce fruit that will change lives for generations to come? 1 apple seed produces a tree that can bear fruit for hundreds of years. You have to believe in the significance of your seed. That is all I have for you on this Self-Care Saturday. I am praying that you are blessed by the meat of this message. Of course, like when you go to a buffet, you can take what feeds your spirit and applies as it is timely and leave the rest. Before you go, of course, I am going to ask that you take a moment to leave a rating. If you don't feel like typing a review, that's cool too. You can leave a rating, which is like 3 taps wherever you are listening. If you're feeling very generous this Self-Care Saturday, then I would invite you to leave an actual review and or grab a screenshot of this episode, share it in your Instagram or Facebook stories and tag me at the Tiffany Huff. Let others know that they will be blessed by this episode. And before I let you go, I got to let you know God is not going to play you. But if you think you can grab hold of your God-sized dream without recognizing the significance of your seed, you are playing yourself. Until next week, be blessed, beautiful.